I had the privilege of meeting Lord Weidenfeld, George, on a number of occasions when I was Principal and Vice-Chancellor at the University of St. Andrews. A charming, generous, attentive and entertaining host, he was also, I discovered, a wonderful conversationalist. He brought to any discussion we had, whether cultural, educational, literary, or most often concerning foreign affairs, a deep and nuanced understanding of whatever the subject at hand. After his death, The Economist wrote of him, "Provincialism and narrow-mindedness were his greatest foes. Reconciliation was his paramount cause." He is deeply missed by those who knew and loved him, and he will be long remembered both here in Oxford and much further afield. The Chancellor's words in the inside page of today's programme, he said that Lord Weidenfeld deserves a chapter of his own in the history of the university. How true that is. But they can be illustrated, and over the course of the next hour, we'll be hearing in more detail about Oxford projects that were spearheaded by Lord Weidenfeld, or with which he was very closely involved. All of them speak to the extraordinary accomplishments of a man who arrived in England in 1938 with, so the story goes, a suitcase, a 6 and 9 penny postal order, and the address of the Great British Fund for Refugees. It may have been the difficulties that he had to overcome as a young man that made him so resolute and so determined to look forward and outwards. George Weidenfeld was the ultimate cosmopolitan, a cultivated man who prized personal loyalty and whose support, once given, was invaluable. We miss him, and we remember him with affection and gratitude.
George Weidenfeld. You were born in Vienna?
I was born in Vienna.
An only child?
Only child.
Were you very spoiled?
Yes and no. I mean, I obviously had a great deal of affection from doting parents and grandparents, but I was also very lonely. I was also left alone. And that probably is the root of my great passion for company and for conviviality.
We are here to celebrate my father's life, and in particular his contribution to Oxford and the living legacy of the Humanitas and the Weidenfeld-Hoffmann Scholars and Leadership Programmes. My father's last project was to raise funds from Jewish donors to help relocate Christian families fleeing Syria, and much was made in the press of my father's wish to repay his debt to Britain and to the Christian family that welcomed him in their home. There has been far less emphasis on the reasons that motivated my father to devote so much energy, passion and time to fundraising for Oxford, of which he was not even an alumnus. It is those reasons which I would like to highlight today. As you've just heard, my father grew up in Vienna at a critical time in its history. Indeed, his time in Vienna was framed by two of the greatest historical crises of the 20th century. He was born in 1919, shortly after the end of the First World War, and fled in 1938, shortly after Hitler's annexation of Austria and before the beginning of the Second World War. My father came from a Jewish family that had fallen temporarily on somewhat hard times during the First World War, after its move to Vienna from the outer reaches of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yet he was taught to take pride in his Jewish ancestry and, in Jewish terms, his aristocratic lineage. When his father gave up academia for the world of insurance and, through imaginative thinking and astute networking, raised the company's profile, family fortunes improved. As an only child, my father was often left to his own devices, yet he kept himself entertained by means of imaginative play, voracious reading, and a variety of interests and passions. Besides, Vienna was a capital rich in history and culture, and the young George took full advantage of its museums, theatres, concerts, and opera. For reasons that were never very clear to me, my father was sent to a Roman Catholic school under the Piarist order of priests, the Piaristengymnasium. Whatever the reason, it left him with an abiding fascination for the Roman Catholic Church, one that culminated professionally with a publication scoop of John Paul II's memoirs. Already one can detect in the biographical details I have summarized so far some of the themes and qualities that drove and defined my father's life and work. Pride in his roots and history, a love and astonishing general knowledge of history and literature, especially German literature, creative imagination, a love for music and the arts, a desire to bring about a better understanding between Christians and Jews, and more generally bridge cultures through dialogue, as well as the importance of networking. Zionism for my father went hand in hand with looking to the future and to the creation of a more peaceful world. It involved vision, passion, and tenacity. It meant a life of engagement and of service to a purpose greater than himself. The first piece of music that New College Choir have so kindly agreed to arrange and sing for us today was one of my father's favorite student songs, Gaudeamus Igitur, which Brahms later incorporated into his academic overture.
In celebrating George's life, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Weidenfeld-Hoffmann Scholars and the Leadership and Humanitas programs. They're very close to my heart, these programs, because many, many years ago, I was a Soros Scholar in Budapest at the Central European University, and that gave me the opportunity to embark on a journey that I couldn't have done otherwise. It changed my life in so many wonderful ways. It helped me be what I am and what I can still be. So I feel very fortunate to be standing up here today to talk to you about the scholars who are at the beginning of their own personal exciting journeys. 177 scholars, 62 countries, 49 courses, all drawn together by a common purpose, by incredibly hard-working and motivated individuals and supporting friends, by one vision. Lord Weidenfeld, George, or Opapa, as the family called him, a multifaceted man of ideas, had a vision that exceptional individuals should study at exceptional universities so they could go on and do exceptional things in their home countries. The Weidenfeld-Hoffmann scholarships, the Leadership and Humanitas programs, are the reality of George's vision and now his legacy. But this is only the beginning of a very exciting journey towards building an ever larger community of leaders ready to put their mark onto the world. George's dream was secured by the setting up of an endowment program which, together with match funding from Oxford, ensures the existence of the Weidenfeld-Hoffmann Scholars in perpetuity. But work remains to be done, and we are determined to continue to secure the future of more scholars and the very all-important leadership program. As always, George's vision would have not come to life were it not for the incredible generosity of Andrew Hoffman and Michael Lewis, Alexandra's tireless and inspirational leadership, and the exceptional generosity and support from the Louis Dreyfus Foundation, Oxford University, and many other wonderful friends and donors. Just to mention a few: the Rousing family, Eric Abraham, Jackie Safra, and Teresa Sackler. As Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. And that's exactly what the leadership program and the scholarship scheme is trying to achieve. And we are grateful for your continuous friendship and support. Thank you very much, and I will let two of the scholars tell you a little bit about their personal experience.
I am one of the first cohort of scholars who were lucky to be selected for the scholarship scheme in 2007. In my work, we all recognize the methodological difficulties of attributing impact to the particular policy intervention. In social sciences, it is the hardest task that any policy evaluator faces. However, when it comes to the impact of the Weidenfeld program, it is straightforward. The change that we all experience is easily attributable, including methodologically, to the program. That means that if there had been no program, we wouldn't have experienced such a dramatic change in our life. Its long-lasting, far-reaching, and profoundly different impact that not only us who would benefit from it, but our families, extended families, and most importantly, our countries and regions. We will all fulfill our dreams in our own ways. But the fundamental, the distinguishing feature of all of us that will remain is our belief in goodness, in a better mankind and humanity.
When we look at the world today, we have many reasons to be anxious, to be troubled. But my fellow Weidenfeld scholars give me hope every day that a different reality is possible. At the end of his epic poem, Ulysses, Lord Alfred Tennyson reflects on the inevitability of aging and of death. But he also leaves us with this poignant reminder to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. This is the legacy of George Weidenfeld. May we continue with his vision, and may he rest in peace.
After a University of Oxford education, working for George Weidenfeld was the opportunity that gave me the most significant start in life. To George and to Weidenfeld and Nicholson, I owe a very great deal. I got a first at Oxford and had a place to do research, but the lure of working in London was at that stage of my life too great. So I wrote round to the main London publishers looking for a job, and it was Weidenfeld that responded. On my first morning in the office, when I visited the coffee machine with the other PAs, I realized that I was the only person who did not have a title. And I have to say my response at the time was to feel doubly honored that Weidenfeld had given me a chance. Despite the fact that the offices of Weidenfeld and Nicholson were in Clapham and situated in a tower block above Lambeth Council, they exuded quality, delight, and intelligence, and they were full of highly stylish characters. Mark Boxer, who worked on the illustrated book list, would put a "Ne pas déranger" sign, clearly acquired from an enviable French hotel, on his door in the early afternoon when he was doing his cartoon for the Times. An elderly gentleman with a name out of a Saki short story, Bertie Van Taal, would arrive every afternoon in evening dress to sit in a minute office acting as a reader for George. We all adored him. Of course, the other thing that made Weidenfeld and Nicholson utterly unreproducible was George himself. His passion for culture, his ability to see what book an author really wanted to write, his encouragement of creativity, all percolated through his publishing house and made people proud to work for him and determined to produce books that enhanced the imprint.
My name is Siddiq Bakir. I'm just going to do a reading about a subject that the students or scholars do in their moral philosophy seminars as well, when they read these ancient texts and learn about leadership and good governance and these essential themes that really go throughout time and history. And it's really apt to read this part, because studying at Oxford is one thing, but being a member of the Weidenfeld scholars is truly another. It's just that intense engagement with these scholars that makes you get to know each other in a way that is not just an academic experience. You become friends, and that's why the story here is about friendship. The subject of friendship is one of the highest importance, and I can only advise you to prefer friendship to all things else within human attainment. For I doubt whether anything better than this, wisdom alone excepted, has ever been given to man by the immortal gods. Some prefer riches to it, some sound health, some power, some prestigious appointments, many even the pleasures of the senses. Those, however, who regard virtue as the supreme good are those who have it right, for it is virtue itself that produces and sustains friendship. And without virtue, there is not even the possibility that true friendship can exist.
George Weidenfeld was both cosmopolitan and continental. When I was preparing to write my Latin speech about him, I consulted an eminent historian. He claimed that to visit George Weidenfeld's London home was to be transported back to Großbürgerlich Vienna before the war, or even to the Belle Époque. I wonder if that was really true. It hardly matters. What does matter is the effect that he made. He was a modern man who gave his authors the feeling of a link not only to the past, to an earlier culture, but to a wider world of grand cultivation. When I wrote his eulogy, I was perhaps risky in quoting Ecclesiastes, "Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh." I did add that the preacher had not had the chance to read Lord Weidenfeld's list. And I admired the wide perspective and the persuasive power of a man who managed to publish both Lolita and John Paul II. And indeed, we should not forget that he had a business to run. As everyone knows, each castaway on the desert island is permitted to take one luxury. Listen carefully, and you will hear him cheating. Allowed one luxury, he actually demands 3 and gets away with 2. He was one too many for Sue Lawley. So there is Weidenfeld the businessman, driving a shrewd bargain, always, of course, with perfect confidence and perfect charm. And it is that voice, that beguiling voice, that we shall now hear once again.
I must end with an enormous confession. I hate islands. I hate the idea of being alone on an island. But as I said before that I'm an incurable optimist. So what I like to feel, that I have a very limited stay on the island, and therefore for that purpose, my luxury would be a very well-sprung armchair with a footrest and 2 flaps on either, 1 flap on either side. On one would be a built-in machine producing endless Turkish coffee. The other one would have a highly sophisticated surveillance system that would signal the nearest tanker to pick me up at my discretion.